G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and so far a fantastic week. Now, as Lenin said, there are decades where nothing happens and there are weeks where decades happen. And this week and the weeks around this week feels a little bit like this. We have stock markets crashing, wider war in the Middle East could be imminent. We have riots and protests throughout the UK. We have Bangladesh's leader choosing just to boost. We have war in Europe, and that is just some of what we can speak of. So I guess strap in. But today we do have a lot to talk about. We need to look at some videos of some fighter jet ejections and some strikes and some updated satellite imagery of strikes as well. We need to look at demographics and the Russian rank. We, of course, will have a look at the maps. And what we're going to do is not only look at the maps, but we're going to then look at what fortifications are under threat from the Russian advances that we are seeing. We'll go over that in length. We need to talk about Russia and Ukraine's energy grid and see what the leader of Ukraine's intelligence service has said about this. And I want to then talk about Mali. Now, we, all throughout the news, you will hear that there could be an imminent attack on Israel in response to strikes throughout the last fortnight and, of course, the ongoing conflict in the Middle East and how that is growing. Now, I was sent something across from a really good friend of mine that's talking about now may be, at least militarily, the best time if they were to launch this. Now, this is what I was sent across. Two main flare threats as we head into Tuesday off the sun. Now, these black spots are absolutely massive. Now, what he says is the black spot on the sun, which will result in solar flares in the next couple of days, satellite constellations and electrical systems will be affected. Would be a good time to with Israel. Now, he goes, continue solar flares knocked out my comms in Afghan. Nothing worked for 8 hours. Guys, incredibly experienced, incredible amount of experience as well. One day, maybe we'll have a chat online beyond this. But, of course, this can have huge effect. This dark main core is roughly the size of 2 planet Earths across. So we keep hearing that this could be an imminent attack, and maybe this will be used to then the advantage of the Iran, the IRGC, the proxies of that for further attack. If you want to know more about the breakdown of all of this and where Russia and China and other nations could be involved, I'll link a video in the top comment. Go and have a watch of that. But another not great sign is that Shoigu, who you'll be familiar with, is in Iran meeting with leaders and top military commanders. Russian military official comment, Russia's Security Council now Secretary Sergei Shoigu said that the US is aware the unipolar power has come to an end in the world. So when we talk unipolar, we mean the US as the major power. Many, including I think we're heading into a century where we see then multipolar worlds. We have multiple powers with massive amounts of dominance and influence across the world. The Islamic weapon welcomes trilateral cooperation between Iran, Russia, and China. So as I've said, these aren't localized X v Y. It is South v West. And not only militarily, economically, politically, everything in this. Now, furthermore, on Shoigu, top Russian security official, close ally of President Putin, of course, used to be in charge of the military but has been moved around. As the world awaits with bated breath Iran's response to the killing of this leader here. I don't know how much of these words I can say because this is YouTube on here. So, Russia meeting with the senior members in Iran. Of course, Russia, not only an ally of Iran for now a long time, but a growing friendship has been then blossoming between those two due to a lot of factors, due partially to then the sanctions on Russia and the movement then of markets, as well as where world orders sit and where, of course, those relations and allies sit. China, they are, of course, heavily involved in all of this and will become more obvious to what extent in the coming months and or years. But again, watch that video. It's a more of a breakdown on this. This isn't about that. It's just to give you a brief overview of what may be happening today. So yesterday, the days prior, we talked about how Mali cut all diplomatic ties to Ukraine and accused Ukraine of aiding terrorism and barbaric acts, and saying that they would then do it again. Of course, what I'm referring to are the Tuareg rebels in Mali who ambushed not only Mali soldiers, but also then Wagner PMC. Well, today, Ukraine has pushed back on these claims, and I just want to go over this as this doesn't line up much for me. So, of course, here we go. The transitional government in the Republic of Mali, of course, there was a military coup, 21, with deep shock, subversive attacks by Mr. Andriy Yusov, the spokesman of the Ukrainian military intelligence, GUR, has admitted Ukraine's involvement, cowardly, treacherous, barbaric attack in armed terrorist groups with elements of Malayan here, as well, of course, then Wagner PMC, and not in this part that I've got, but he also, this guy here, did allude to, they said that they would do it again, and that is concerning. Therefore, all diplomatic ties are cut off. Now, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine then released this statement today. The transitional government of the Republic of Mali to break off diplomatic relations with Ukraine is short-sighted and hasty. Ukraine unconditionally adheres to the norms of international law, inviolability of sovereignty and territorial integrity of other countries, and resolutely rejects the accusations of the transitional government of Mali of alleged Ukraine support of international terrorism. Now, of course, these are Mali soldiers in here. Of course, there was a military coup, but we've seen coups happen in a lot of countries. I'm sure they should be familiar with this as well. Regrettably, the transitional government of the Republic of Mali decided to sever diplomatic relations with Ukraine without conducting a thorough study of the facts and circumstances of the incident in the north of Mali, without providing any evidence of Ukraine's involvement in the mentioned events. Ukraine reserves the right to take all necessary political and diplomatic measures in response to unfriendly actions of the transitional government of the Republic of Mali. I wouldn't say it's unfriendly. I'd say they're cutting off diplomatic ties. But they say there's no evidence. They haven't conducted a thorough study. But what they're referring to, what Mali's been referring to, is what Andriy Yusov, the head of military intelligence, said. Now, let's look at what he actually said after this took place. Stated, the insurgents received the necessary information, and not only the information that allowed to conduct a successful military operation against Russian criminals. About the details, we definitely won't work at the moment, but there will be a continuation. So there's definitely a level of, partnership in this, and that there will be more continuation. There's definitely alluding to that. To say that there's nothing, I think, is a bit rich. Now, what I think this may be in response to, and I know Africa's massive and there's many different countries in here, but Ukraine's foreign minister, of course, Dmitry Kuleba, who we've spoken about before, is in Africa at the moment. This is a day old, to try and win support of the global south against Russia. And as we do know, that Ukraine at the signed peace communique failed to gather the global south together. And I think Ukraine is realizing in this that Mali is part of the global south. They have a lot of influence in countries surrounding them as well. Of course, Russia has massive influence into Mali and that area of the world too, and that Mali's part of that global south that they need to get on board. Just getting your own allies on board again, that's not going to put any pressure on Russia. You need to get countries that may be more friendly to Russia, may have more ties to Russia. They're the ones that can then put pressure on Russia. That's like I said with the communique. Australia and America and Europe signing this, it's not changing anything. We already know that was going to happen. You need to get the countries that may be on the fence on your side. It's like swing voters. You don't need to appeal to who is already going to vote Democratic or who is already going to vote Republican. You need to get that piece in the middle if you then want to win. Now, let's look at some strikes videos, then we'll look at the maps. And I've got some interesting ones for you here as well. So I just want to update. I've spoken about the Morozovsk airfield in Rostov over the past few days. We have some more high-def photos. So whoever built this watchtower needs a raise, but this is the ammo dump that exploded completely. Of course, that massive bang that we saw, and chain reaction events, everything in here will be destroyed. We also have spoken about claims of fighter aircraft and how I have said ammo can be replaced, fuel can be replaced far more easily than the airframes themselves. And as we're not sure how many airframes that are being built of Su-34 a year. We know it's at least, say, 4 to 10 from what what photographs we see, but we're not 100% sure. But we can see by these images, at least one Su-34 has been destroyed, and that 2 more are very likely damaged as well. Of course, airframes are still very susceptible to things like shrapnel. So there's at least 1 out, 2 more potentially damaged, most likely damaged. So a bit more is coming too of what actually happened on that airfield. Like I said, like I always say, 1-2 days, look what we get. We get evidence. And that's why things like the attacks on the Tu-22 aircrafts up the north, we haven't seen anything since that. It always seems to come out. Now, I want to continue speaking on Su-34s. Now, this happened on the 22nd of December, 2023, I believe. We have a geolocation here of where it happened. So we're talking around Kherson. But this is a very interesting video. Oh, sorry, this may not actually be a Su-34, maybe a Su-32. Regardless, that doesn't matter. So what we can see here is the plane falling down right there. And this is a Russian pilot, filming his own plane under canopy here after ejecting from this. Unbelievable footage, isn't it? And then he comes out. I'm not actually sure what he then says to the camera. I'm sure someone will tell me here, and I'll update you tomorrow with that. But it's insane footage that we have coming out. Now, there's been a number of drone strikes into Ukraine overnight. Ukraine has said they've hit 100% of the drones. There's also been, I believe, several Iskanders. We do have footage of one of them getting hit in the air. I don't actually have that on me. I just saw it on a friend's Instagram. But then we see an Iskander also then strike here as well in Kyiv. Now, it looks like this has been intercepted. See how it's coming down on its side? Potentially has been intercepted and then has struck, or I could be wrong. Let me know what you think. Now, let's have a look at the maps and see what is changing. We have some very interesting updates. Here is Ukraine, the center, the capital of Kyiv. The red areas occupied since 22, the purple since 2014. Of course, the red check is areas that have updated in the past 24 hours, and the blue will be that, but for Ukraine. Now, let's come down into Avdiivka straight off the bat and have a look what is changing. Now, Russia is expanding control around Zeleny here. And as we can see, this is shown across multiple different maps. But what I want to show you in here is where the fortifications are sitting and why these updates are interesting and where areas may then fall. And that small grinds may be more important than even large sloths at some points. So Syriac maps, he shows in the same direction out here in Zeleny. Doesn't show, Deep State doesn't show the same out near Avdiivka here, but realistically these maps are very, very similar to each other. And then he shows Syriac just this filling in around Zeleny here as well. So look, these maps, it's only taken 2 years, but they are very similar at the moment, at least in Avdiivka. Now, the fortifications we're going to be using is of John Helen here. I am flogging his map. I apologize. Go and look at his map. Go and follow himself. Now, of course, what we've spoken about is the Vovcha down in here. This creates a natural barrier. Now, that is going to be a problem for Russia if and when they get up to here. But at the same time, that means Ukraine have this area to then get out of. Now, let's have a look at where the fortifications are sitting in here. So, this is the Avdiivka fortifications area. Now we can see Zeleny, Vesely, Serhivka here, that there is a major fortification line here that is looking like, or it may be under a threat of falling. We can see this one near Ivanivka here. Of course, this map on his is a few days old of the red, but let's try and line up, see Ivanivka in here, Vesely. So this is all filled in. So there has been a major defensive line, potentially both here and here, has then fallen. This one potentially as well. But where I want to look is to the west of Novoselivskaya Persha, between the reservoir here, that there are 3 major defensive works sitting down near Mezove through here. Of course, Mezove, and I can't read this one, it's too small for me. These are the last areas then left before we get out of, I guess, this sphere of influence of Avdiivka. So that these are now potentially under threat of these movements. And you can see it better. I've just drawn this in here. This is where the defensive works sit, and this is where Russia is pushing down, trying to sort of on a large scale almost flank these defensive works coming from the south, not coming from the east, heading then west. And of course, you're shut off by the Volcha down here as well. So that creates a lot of issues, and there are defensive works coming under threat in this area. Well, there has been the entire time this is moving. You can see the blue that are sitting in here, but you can see that these, of course, we have Pokrovsk out here, that they do thin out through here. And past Pokrovsk, there are a couple of major works, but it is more thin through there. So what we could potentially see, and this is potential, we may see things speed up beyond that. It could move very slow and then start moving very quickly. Now let's just move to the north, and we're looking in the New York Toretsk front. Now what we can see straight away by the red check, a lot of ground has been made in here. So let's step back. Apologies, they're slow. And then we step forward, and you can see that a lot of this 2014 line is now coming under control and pushing west of Zaporizhzhia here too. What, of course, we've spoken about, that there is waterways in here, that grey zone to grey zone, there is a 2.6 kilometre gap, but you need to really measure to here because you're not coming across water. So you've got a kilometre, and then you've got, say, another, say, kilometre as well. So that's how you need to measure this, because you're not just driving tanks and large things across here. And of course, with this, the built-up areas coming under control, you're crossing out of large open territory in here. Now, what the defensive works in here are very important. These have been sitting here since 2014, now over 10 years in this area, and they are now coming under control. So let's have a look at where the fortifications sit in here versus these movements. So, of course, this is a few days old, but regardless, it doesn't matter. Let's have a look at this water reservoir here. This is this one. So let's just cut basically a straight line across here. A lot of defensive works have come under control, potentially these ones too, at least by the grey zone that is contested as well. If we were to overlay this, you can see these defensive works in here are under threat and or could have then fallen. And a lot of these, it looks like that Russia may be enveloping rather than actually trying to push through that defensive work. At some points, you need to just go through defensive works, but if you can get out and around it, that is a far better way to do it. Or if it is a work set up for east to west, if you can head north or south into that, it's going to be significantly less powerful against your force coming upon this. So that is very interesting to look at as well. Now we have a few map updates in here. So the first one from Syriac shows this map movement here, Pevnechny here. So look, let's just say same amount, same at least area. So we know there has been some movements in here. We have a few as well. So this is showing that Ukraine has moved out of this area down in here. So let's talk and see what Syriac says about that. Russian army began to enter 2014 Ukrainian trench system east of New York after withdrawal of Ukrainian forces, and this will line up to the next one. Pevnechny, Russian forces seized all territory east of this avenue, and the minus 70% of the town is now under control. That is lining up to now this here. This is the carry-on map from the one I showed you of this area up in here just before. So more control coming upon there. Now, Noel reports, Ukrainian source 2 has his map here too, so he's showing filling around Pivdeni here and around in Pivnechny here too, as well as this push out from New York. But he doesn't go south enough to see exactly what is happening down in here, but we can confirm there's large movements there, and fortifications are definitely being threatened, if not are actually falling in some areas, and that is very, very important. Fortifications, if you are the side without your numerical inferiority, you don't have the numerical numbers, the most important thing will be defensive works, because you can fight a much larger enemy with a much smaller force if you have the defensive works. That said, that has been a problem for Ukraine, and it looks like Russia is still being able to move through these works. Now, let's come down to Robotny. Now, no change on this map. We have said this area, we believe, is probably the area that is most incorrect on this map. Let's have a look. How do I turn on defensive lines? And the reason we think this is this is where Ukraine had a hell of a lot of fighting and losses to try on their offensive last year, and that it could be part of like an information campaign not to show that Russia is having success in here, because many other maps, including Ukrainian ones, are showing Russia is having a lot of success in here. So this is Noel reports here, Ukrainian account following this. And so he shows Robotny in here and the defensive works by the black lines is, I'll say, completely under Russian control, maybe bar a few streets all the way through the grey zone here. And what he's showing today is that the remainder on the eastern side here, a lot of this has come under Russian control as well, of course, where these defensive works come out. It's not the easiest thing to try and line up, but again, he's showing a significant portion of land has been recaptured by the Russians after it was recaptured by the Ukrainians in 2023, so the back and forwards. Now, what he shows on the eastern side, this is corroborated with Syriac maps showing on the eastern side here, 72 hours, Russian army recaptured series of trenches northeast of Robotny, forcing the Ukrainian army to withdraw northwards and closing up. Of course, he's showing a lot more in here than both other maps combined, but an interesting thing to look at. Now, let's come to the other area of the Ukrainian 2023 offensive into the Zaporizhzhia, Urzani, then front. Let's bring up then this. Now, this map is showing on this road out here that Russia is further pushing up, I believe, to where my cursor is just here. If we line up where the creek turns, yes, right where my cursor is, still shown as grey zone, showing that that has moved up and Russia has made some ground down here. Again, can't confirm that from anything else, but it's just to be aware that is what some maps are then showing. So there is movement on the maps, and Ukraine's having a lot of maybe strategic strikes and victories with drones into oil depots, drones into ammo depots, this, that, and the rest. But a strategic victories still need to then come into have a tactical element. And what we have seen, regardless of those strikes, yes, they're having an effect. What effect is it coming then onto the front line? How much is that enough to stop the movement? It doesn't yet seem like it. And that is, there's two wars. There's strategic and tactical. Yes, you need to hit energy and this and that, things that affect the economy. But as well, you also need to have tactical movements on the front because these are interlinked. And at the moment, Russia has the initiative, and it seems as if that initiative is actually accelerating, which is very concerning as well, as Russia has the manpower and, of course, motivation, morale. All this sort of leads in that if you have poor motivation, poor morale, it then makes it worse. And if you have good, it makes it then better. It's like a slippery slope both ways. It can snowball either way. And I think that's happening for Russia. They're having more of that. And Russia and Ukraine's having then the opposite effect of that. Was having huge, huge effects. And I can't believe Ukraine is not announcing or hasn't massive amounts of mobilization. I just don't see any way around that. Regardless of airfields, regardless of oil fields, you're going to need to have military victories to have something to stand on if you have a November negotiation. Because if Russia's still moving like this in November, I don't see, for your territorial integrity, what is going to be brought to the table that Russia will even bother attending the conference. Therefore, will China bother attending? Because if it is, we want this border, but you're still moving south to north or east to west. I don't know. Ukraine needs, I think they need to win. They need to really start having some wins on the front line as well as those strategic wins. Now, we spoke about strategy in there too, and there's another thing. I'm going to make a complete video on this. I've done one before, but an update on this is another crisis that Ukraine is having is actually their demographics and population. Now, Ukraine's birth rate continues a downward trend in 2024, as official data shows one newborn per 3 deaths in the first 6 months of the year. About 88,000 children were born in the first half, and 251,000 citizens died of various causes during the same period. Of course, Ukraine has a demographic crisis, very old population, and of course, a lot of people leaving. Of course, the war has sped that up dramatically, and we will look at early 1990s, so just after the Soviet Union, 50 million down to 37 million by January 2024. I believe this number would be significantly less than that because this is the population, but if you were to take into account people that have left as refugees, or refugees might be the wrong word, but have left Ukraine into Europe or somewhere else in the world due to the war, this probably deducts 10 to 15 million potentially off this, but the population could drop to 15.3 million by 2100. Of course, Russia has its own replacement rate issues, but Ukraine is really, really bad as well. But the data cited did not distinguish between different causes of deaths. I know a lot of people will go, oh, this is due to the war. It's due to everything. But the data is not available in occupied areas, but it's the birth rate is 1.4 times smaller during the same period than it was then in 2021. Although we have 132,000 births, the same was 349. Sorry, that's incorrect. In 2021, we had this many births. The deaths in the same period was 349,000. So it is larger. Of course, they point out this is during the pandemic, but at the same time, you had a much larger population in the country because there's millions have, of course, then left. So the numbers get skewed dramatically by this. Over 6 million Ukrainians remain abroad. I've heard it's significantly more than that if they fled the country. Around 700,000 more are expected to leave in 24-25. And having losses on the front like this and that continued moving and not being able to, having the missiles still come in, the drones still come in, more and more people are going to leave. And I believe the longer these people are outside of the country, the less likely they are then to come back, especially if a deal is signed and it's not the 1991 sovereign territorial borders, I guess, promised. So I think that is a whole thing playing into this. Now, there has been purges in actually both the Russian and Ukrainian senior rank over the past year and throughout the war. And today in Russia is no different. The tensions and growing military purge, investigators said Patriot Park director Vyacheslav Akhmedov and Major General Vladimir Shesterov involved in the embezzlement of public funds allocated to ensure the activities of a functioning Patriot Park and its exhibition center, around 40 million rubles, so $471,000 in contracts, and they face up to 10 years in prison. This is peak male performance right here, and my eyebrows actually. But there, of course, more movement, and we know Russia has massive problems through corruption, oligarchs, and how that system has a lot of issues, especially that has flooded down onto the front line. And I actually believe we would never get this, but if Putin had ever memoirs, I'd be really interested to know what he was getting told versus how the war unfolded. Because I think Putin probably believed his forces were at the same NATO standard heading into the 24th of February on that invasion. And we saw, of course, those massive problems with the Air Force, with tri-service of services then working together, and tactics and corruption leading into some not existing and things not happening. I'd like to know, what happened in the Kremlin if he was like, you told me for a decade that this was perfect, this is all going ahead, and next thing I find out, this is actually the standard of what has happened. That'd be very interesting to know. Now, let's talk about energy here too. Now, Budanov, of course, head here of intelligence, has said in this, in an interview, can Russia destroy Ukraine's energy system and how will we retaliate? All these nodes are very well protected, just as we try to protect ours. Similar measures are being taken by Russia. So what we know is the Soviet Union was paranoid about war. So there's a lot of things, even basements on buildings through to bridges, all of this, electricity grids that are very, very well protected. This is one of the really good things for when we see attacks, that people have actual hardened areas to go to in metros and things. And this is why the energy grid is very difficult to also then take out. They've taken the path of increasing the air defense system. They have much greater capabilities for this because they are manufacturers of such systems. So they're making them domestically, therefore can just have them. So to say that we will now take down their energy system, well, that probably be a bit incorrect. We won't completely take it down, just as they won't completely take down ours either. The Soviet system was maximally branched and duplicated, conditionally 3 or 4 times, or in certain nodes there is duplication, making life difficult as possible, completely destroying it is almost impossible. Saying taking out either energy grid is as he says, almost impossible because there's backups on backups because of there was always this idea that there was going to be wider war. Now, I can't really find anything on the energy system if you can send me something, but I think a good example of this is actually the Soviet railway system. So this is a great video on this. Why trains lead to Moscow, the red line. It took me a while to find this. But almost all train lines have to actually go to Moscow and then back out. So, of course, there's interlinks between this. This is an extreme version. But regardless, if you want to go from Saratov to down here in Vorozhne, you have to go through Moscow and down. Now, why is this? Well, I believe this was after the Bolshevik Revolution, 1917, that if you can stop rebel groups being able to link up somewhere else and then attack, that reduces their effectiveness of being able to actually, what effect they can then have on the government. So rebel groups have to link up, would have to go to Moscow. So you'd have to go to the capital first, where, of course, the massive amount of, as we say, centralized command and control. They can also do a rapid mobilization and deployment of this, because then it can go out from the center to anywhere. And, as we say, defense of the capital, that everything's there. If a group was to have like a revolution, it has to go there sort of first. Things have changed with highways and vehicles and blah, blah, blah. But when this was all built, it still exists. This is why Russia is incredibly reliant on railways. Now, railways can be very easy to take out, but of course they, on the other hand, very easy to fix as well. They've got a whole core around railways. Logistical effectiveness, efficiency, and strategic reserve. So the reason I bring this up is I think it would be a similar-ish system of the electric grid. I'm not saying it all goes through Moscow. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there is a wartime element that we've taken into, that Russia and the Soviets have taken into consideration. This is one of my critiques, I guess, of the Western world or Australia, is we don't take into consideration of war. Like when we're building a bridge or we're building an energy system or we're building X, Y, Z, we don't take into consideration of war. We just take into consideration what's scratching some politicians back somewhere and what is maybe the most efficient and or the cheapest bidder that China is paying for. So that's, yeah, you can have an obsession with this and paranoia, but you can also have think nothing is ever going to occur. And of course you can have a huge swing too. You're better off being prepared than not. Anyway, legends, that is end of video today. I hope that you're having a fantastic day. If you'd like to support me, links down below. But look after yourselves, look after your families, and I'll speak to you very, very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.